Okay, and it looks like we are live. I am very excited to introduce you, all of my students, to Angelique Chelton, who is going to speak with us about infant loss and stillbirth and bereavement after birth and how it directly impacts postpartum healing and the things we can do to either prepare or mitigate the differences that you'll experience if this is your outcome. So Angelique, I'm going to pass the torch on to you and let you introduce yourself and speak a little bit about the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. My name is Angelique Chelton. I am a doula, a lactation counselor. I am a certified childbirth educator. I am a certified midwifery assistant, and I am a perinatal bereavement specialist. I came into this work through first through personal experience, two losses, my first two pregnancies. My first baby was named Callan, and I lost that baby at 8 weeks gestation. My second baby was Anderl, and about a year, almost exactly a year later, at 22 and a half weeks. So I was a bereaved mom before I was a birth professional. And into birth work after my living children were born, I began to see the incredible ways that could really meet a lot of the needs that bereaved families have. And as I learned more about doula work and about midwifery, I'm right there during the time when a woman is pregnant, the people who are right there actually at the birth itself, these are the people who are in position immediate impact to the birthing family if a loss occurs. And so it has become my professional passion to help birth professionals of all stripes learn more about how to be holistically present with during a time of perinatal loss. So I do have my doula midwifery side of things, but then I have a separate entity called Perinatal Bereavement Care that's all about you. It's all about training birth professionals, supporting birth professionals to be with families, their losses. So that's what I do, and I'm really happy to be here with you.
I am so happy that you're here too. So at the, I want to exercise a little bit of mindfulness around how we talk about this, because I know you and I can probably go off to the races as professionals, but I want to make sure that we're speaking to the mothers here and the families. And really, I know that there's going to be a big difference in experience between those who are preparing for this, who know that, the birth is coming and they've already experienced a loss, and they're preparing for and expecting the loss, and those who, kind of have it where it's a surprise. And I guess my question around this is, like, what if a family has the I guess the silver lining of being able to anticipate this, how would one prepare for the first, like the early days of this, the early weeks, and then the process of healing beyond that?
Okay. So you're exactly right. There are many different ways that pregnancy loss occurs. Have an early trimester miscarriage. You can have a later trimester stillbirth. You can have a woman who a termination, which is a kind of loss. And then you also have people who are going through their pregnancy. They come to a point where perhaps they have sort of a prenatal genetic testing done, or they go in for that, level 2 ultrasound somewhere 20, 21, 22 weeks, and that their baby is not expected to live through pregnancy, to, through, or long after the birth. And so this is a family, a lot of hard decisions to make in what can be a relatively short amount of time. So if we think about patchwork of different state and federal laws that surround a woman's ability to make decisions about pregnancy, most states do have cutoffs around the time of viability. So you have families in that situation who are going in for their level 2 at 21, 20, 21, 22. We maybe only have until 24 weeks in their particular state where they can make decisions. So the law in the woman's state a lot to do with the decisions that she and her family are able to make around the time of discovering that this loss is occurring for them. So the professional who is companioning a woman and a family in a situation where they have now discovered somehow that they are that their baby is not after the birth. What should she do? What should that birth professional do? And one of the first things that you can do is you can support this family to get the need. So that is helping them to practice good informed consent, but in a gentle way. Mm-hmm. When first discover that there's a loss, whether it's miscarriage, stillbirth, or they find themselves in a situation where they are expecting some sort of demise, is going to go through acute grief. And that acute grief really does impact their ability to understand them, to process information that's given to them. And so one of the things that you can do to help this family practice really good informed consent for themselves to slow things down. So if the medical team offers an option to the family, help them to heal and then let the option rest. Take a few to them. You want to take 15 minutes or a half hour or a day or a week time to kind of let your settle on you. Any questions come up for you, or to see if any direction comes up for you. Perhaps in allowing things to set for a while, will come up with a way forward that is true for them and is has some in them that they're going to feel confident that this is what I feel like we have to do, whether that be to move to a termination or to carry to term, right for us. And then the family can begin making further decisions based on whatever it is they've decided in that time. Things down is one thing that birth professionals can do. Another thing that you can do is take really good notes of what is available to the, because they're going to have a hard time understanding their options. This is a stress reaction, a grief reaction, where there's just kind of a fog settles in. It's that shock and disbelief of what's happening. The family will really appreciate if, as they are talking things through, say to them, oh yes, the doctor did say this, or this was the other option that was presented to you. And actually having you there, speak to them, be that person who is one step removed from the horror of the situation, can be so valuable to them, that you are leading them in their discussions, but that you are able to fill in the pieces that they may have missed of their grief. The third thing that a bereavement or a birth professional can do who finds themselves serving in a bereavement is you can reassure your client that they are not alone. They are not the first person who has gone through this. And there are so many people out there willing to support them. There are so many resources that are available, and that they are not going to have to figure this out all by some kind of support or information or guidance. Other people have this path before, and they will walk with them too. Such comfort, and they won't hear it unless someone tells them.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that what you're talking about now, when if in the event I have any students that are watching this and they're going through this experience, really you're emphasizing the fact that the support's available and that these services are available and that there are resources, and absolutely they don't have to go through it alone. So can you explain a little bit about how a bereavement doula would serve in the capacity of postpartum healing? So, say a loss has occurred, or, fetal demise, and, physiologically the mother is still going through, let's say, it's a late term loss, and she's having to go through a lot of the same, lactation issues and the baby blues and postpartum depression and a lot of, like uterine involution and everything still happens. So how does the bereavement doula serve, and would you specifically recommend still reaching out to a bereavement doula versus a postpartum doula in this instance?
So my opinion is that anybody who is working perinatally with pregnant women has to have bereavement skills. That's one opinion. So there may be people who choose to specialize in bereavement. And of course, if you have people in your community who specialize in this, definitely tap them if you have a need. A lot of times bereavement doulas wind up supporting other doulas as much as they wind up supporting families in the community.
Yep, I can imagine that.
So your community who specializes, please go after them. Let them be your support while you are supporting your client, because you, as the person who with that client, the client is going to feel comfortable with you. The client may actually start to even feel dependent on you, which is again and now part of that grief and shock that happens during acute grief. So your relationship with the client is vital, and you are super important to that family receiving excellent care. So definitely, as a postpartum doula, have those so that when your client needs you, you're ready for the task. And you can then tap the specialized bereavement doula in your community to be your support person. So as a postpartum doula, your care for your client will continue to be the same in some ways, will become a little different in other ways. So, Stephanie, you're exactly right that physically the woman is going through the exact same thing on through if she had a live baby with her. And this can actually start very early in the pregnancy. There are some women who have had, pregnancies and they breastfed. They're 13, 14, 15 weeks along, and they have a loss, and they're lactating after that loss. Their milk comes in. These women are having postpartum experiences physically that are exactly the same. So whatever your support would be physically for a mother who has had a baby, you can continue that kind of support without any what the difference comes in then with the mother's specialized and unique bereavement emotional needs. So this is not a woman who has her baby. It's not a woman who is able to offset some of those hard parts of pregnancy, the delightful outcome of having a snuggly little baby to care for. So this is a woman who your service will be a little different for. So how does it change? Often the service for a bereaved client becomes much more extensive in length. And the woman may want you to be there more than you would have been should she have had a live baby. Has contracted you to come in 3 times a week for 4 hours a day, and you're in with her, and she was expecting that to continue after she had the baby. And so that's what you've discussed, that's what you were all expecting, but now she's had a loss. So her need of you, she might not need you to come in, 4 hours a day, 3 times a week. She may need to call you on the phone. She may need to call you 2 months after she's had her baby, and she may need to call you 6 months after she's had her baby. So I actually have created and pulled from people experienced than I am, and have kind of put together a suggested contact schedule for birth work woman has had the loss. And so I always say to contact daily for the first week. So she might still be in the hospital, or daily contact can be a text. I'm thinking about you. When can I come to see you? What kind of dinner ring? Not, do you want me to bring dinner? Is there anything I can do for you? No open-ended questions. What kind of dinner would you like me to bring? What kind of, how often does your dog need to be taken out? What is the closest park that I can take your older children to? Whatever you're comfortable.
They will always say no if you give them the chance to say no.
Right, because a lot of time, and so you ask them and they're going to say, I don't know. They won't have an answer for you. And it really shouldn't be up to the bereaved parent to come up with a list of things and to start coordinating an army of support, that has that. So often what happens is, let me know if you need anything, and then they never reach out because they don't have the energy to think of what they need. So be specific, that daily contact. What can I bring you to eat? What time would you like me to come? Where should I, what kids to? And again, it's going to be up to what you feel comfortable with, your liability and everything else. But just for general, be specific. How do you want me to bring with me when I come? So contact daily for the first week. Okay, then it goes to weekly for the first month. So weekly is what resources are you using? What are you thinking about today? So you're being very specific, yes or no questions. You're really trying to understand what the needs are that are happening here. 100% certain that there are to be filled. So weekly for the first month, monthly for the first 3 months, and then any important anniversaries through. So when she first learned that she had a loss, please put that on your calendar. So, if she found out on October 22nd has an issue that the baby will not be able to breathe after birth, but then she carried that baby until March, please put that October date so that following year you can contact the family. Even a text, a card, an email. It doesn't have to be like very, it doesn't have have to gesture, but any gesture, letting them know that you're thinking about them, that you're available if they need to talk, or if they sources, you're being present and available opens a door to this family to find and discover resources to healing. And as bereavement and postpartum professionals, as perinatal professionals, when a family has a loss, our desire for this, our goal or our mission for this family has to adjust a bit. So instead of looking at, this is a family and I want them to have one very bonded beginning so that they can have a wonderful, healthy start to their life together, our goal, our mission for them kind of changes to have a healthy start to their healing, to have a healthy basis on which to begin rebuilding this life and this future for themselves.
Absolutely.
So that's what that's where our service is focused.
Very good. I guess that kind of leads into my next question about what you have seen in your service as some of the things that tend to surprise families going through this, or what kind of catches them off guard in this process?
Mm-hmm. So it does depend somewhat on gestational age, because families have experiences depending on when they lose their babies or discover the loss. So a family who loses their baby early in the pregnancy, that I hear from them very often is, I didn't know it would hurt so much, and they usually phrase it in a more self-critical way. Why I can't get over this. I don't know why I'm and they kind of phrase it in a way where they're putting themselves down for not having gotten over the death of their. So, sometimes helping them to reframe the situation and helping them to recognize that there are people who have early losses who mourn that loss for the rest of their life. It doesn't mean they are unhealthily, that they have some sort of, mental disorder. It means that their child was so valuable to them that it is a loss that they will never be the same again after. So helping them to that when a parent loses a child, they hurt. Does the parent who loses a 1-year-old hurt less than the parent who loses a 10? We don't think of it that way when the children are already born. We just think of what a horrible tragedy it would be. Well, it's the same thing when a woman is pregnant, because the depth of it is not dependent on gestational age. It's dependent on investment, the parent's investment in the pregnancy and in the baby. So parent early, I often hear self-critical talk about, why can't I get over it? And there's sometimes a mismatched expectation between partners. Birthing partner takes longer to heal than the non-birthing partner. So sometimes, like, dad will not understand why mom is still talking 3, 4, 5 months later. So sometimes there's a mismatch there where in that kind of situation, I might refer to counseling, but you might see something like that. And so the surprise is how much it hurts and how much it truly changes you, even from an early loss. Who has a later loss, I think that some of the surprises that come for them are how quickly everybody else forgets.
Interesting.
So people are sometimes just so uncomfortable with death and with loss and with other people's pain that say or do anything that could provoke emotions, hard, deep, hard, true, real, raw emotion. We can't have. So people are so uncomfortable. Yeah. People are so uncomfortable with it that they just disappear because they don't want to hurt anybody. They don't want to provoke anybody. I think that parents who have later losses often feel very lonely in their loss, because while they might find a lot of good support right around the time of the loss, a little bit later when people stop talking about their child, and it's almost like their child didn't happen, their child didn't exist, their child wasn't real. And so, you know, every day they're remembering that they had a baby and everybody else around them is silent. Nobody else acknowledges that. Nobody else sees it. But parents in the birth and the brill. That's why it's really important for people who have experienced a bereavement to find places of meeting and find places of space that recognizes them and what their experiences have been. So support groups, online support groups, you know, often times are support groups for families who have experienced a perinatal loss. There, you know, it can be very awkward for a family to walk in there for the first time and feel, yes, my whole heart has just been completely ripped out and I am raw and bleeding, but let me walk into a room of strangers and tell you about this. It's just sometimes. So Facebook is sometimes feels a little safer. There's a little bit more distance, so that might be a possibility. However, a postpartum doula will accompany the family to that first visit as kind of a support person for them to even access that kind of care. So that's another option for them. The not being able to get over it and being surprised how much it hurts, and then also being surprised for later families how nobody notices anymore.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting juxtaposition between, and what I'm finding really interesting too is, like, it's hard enough to find support for postpartum with a baby in the picture. And so I can only imagine the level of need and, you know, how quickly everybody forgets. And I've definitely, you know, as an observer, have seen that as the common complaint really is that we are unable in a very literal way to let this go, and everybody's moving on without us. What are some of the misconceptions about postpartum and, you know, pregnancy loss and bereavement, I guess, you know, in the public, and when we're talking about, you know, maybe from the perspective of, you know, the extended family or the wider community, friends of somebody that has lost a pregnancy, what do you feel like, in what areas could we grow as a culture, and in what ways could we change our infrastructure? I know that there's so much room for change with postpartum care and pregnancy care in general, but in this area specifically, what are your thoughts?
Right, so great question. So one of the things that I think that parents could really use as far as support from their community is the recognition that most families out of a bereavement the same as they went into it. They will be different, and it may be something as minor as this person will always remember and will grieve over for, you know, at different times throughout the rest of that person's. We don't ever stop being a parent whose child has died. It is a fundamental change in being. So just like when you have a baby, that you are a mother, you are a parent from that time forward. It's the same thing with a pregnancy loss, is that you were pregnant, you were expecting and preparing for a child, and then the child is not here. So at whatever point of the pregnancy that happened, or even after the pregnancy that happened, children in the NICU as well. That family is not going to be the same. And I think that one of the things that our culture does not recognize, don't get over pregnancy losses, because we don't get over how much we loved our babies. So what we do is we heal, integrate that grief into our life. And bereaved families who have successfully integrated their losses find that the child becomes a familiar face at the table. It is something that they live with. They are able to live completely normal lives, but they have this companion that is with them, that walks through the life journey with them. And it's not something that's crippling. It's not something that ruins the rest of their life. It is a nuance to a horrible situation. And so these families will often come out different, maybe small, maybe monumental. A lot of times people losing a child will cause them to question things spiritually, will cause them to question everything about their life and about their family and about their place in the world. So these are big questions that often come along with the death of a child. And so the person is almost like a phoenix that's kind of burned up in this grief and this loss and the rawness and passion and power of that, and then walks out different than they went in. Their child changes them, and the loss of their child changes them. And so I think that that's one thing that the wider doesn't recognize, that happens. And a lot of times the wider community kind of expects people to get over it, to go back to being who they were, ever kind of be the way it was before, the child and the loss happened. So that doesn't happen. I'm very proud at the kind of advocacy over, let's say the last 30 years, because it's really in the 1980s that the way that parents dealt with their change, and we started having things, we started having parents demanding a different kind of experience in the hospital when they had a stillbirth in the 1980s. And started getting perinatal hospice, where families were desiring services for themselves and for their child who was facing death. And we started seeing those kinds of programs growing in the 1990s. And so over, these past 30 plus years, there's been just tremendous have been taking place in how we do care for bereaved families. We still have a long way to go. Some of the things that could be done, there are many bereaved families who feel strongly that their child should have some sort of official recognition from the state. Sometimes, I think they call these angel bills most of the time in the different states where they've been proposed. And this is where, instead of a family simply receiving a certificate of child, they receive a certificate of life that the child actually existed. And so they have something that shows that this was their baby, they were this baby's parents, and it matters very deeply to some parents that they don't want to just have a certificate of death, as if the only that a child actually makes is that they're gone and that they died. So some parents have started asking for a certificate of life from the state. Another thing that could be a huge boon for families is that if we had some sort of recognized national leave and women and postpartum women, right? If we had leave for women that was guaranteed and goes way beyond, our 12 unpaid weeks, if time that was actually built into our federal laws, then a woman who loses a child could access that time, could access part of her pay, could access whatever postpartum healing she needed. She would have that there available to her to use, even if her child is no longer alive.
Absolutely. I'm so
that
pleased
could
that
be
you brought that
covered.
up.
Mhm. So some of that could be covered under new bereavement law, and the Family Medical Leave Act and that sort of thing does allow for some things like that, but it's very selective the way that it's applied, and one way and another employer another way. But honestly, there are many women who have a miscarriage early in pregnancy, and all they can do is take short-term disability if they happen to that. So having bereavement and pregnancy loss actually written into our laws would be an incredible boon for families.
Awesome. Yep. I haven't even considered that. And that is, I mean, so much of this is just so tied into like the bigger, wider picture of how much work we have to do for, one, dispelling the whole bounce back myth, which is all I thought about. It's like, no, you're not the same person. There's no going back. You are changed forever. And then absolutely like having that infrastructure, that super basic infrastructure in place for every outcome. This also kind of leads into my last question for you, and kind of something I want to end on is, what are some ways that a family who has experienced loss, big or small, ways that they could honor their child and honor that life? I know that, of course, it's such a highly individualized thing, but what have you seen, and what are some ideas that you could give some folks?
Great. So excellent question. It is really, really individual. And great things that you could do is you could ask the parent, what would be special? What kinds of things would you like to do to honor your baby? There are all different kinds of ideas. There's everything from dove releases, butterfly releases, tree plantings. Some families will use the little paper heart seeds, paper that has seeds in it, and they'll, scatter those all over the place. So there, with my son, when we lost him, we had a toast, and so we invited all of our family and friends to my home, and we actually the impact that my son has on the world. And this video is my son impacting the world. So we had a toast for Andrew. It's going to change the world. So, it is really individual. But one thing that, if a bereaved family really can't think of anything, or they don't have the energy to do something right away, they don't have to. They can do any kind of memorials that they want at any point in time, and that's okay. One good thing that we country is that October has been declared by President Reagan, was declared National Pregnancy and Infant Month. So usually during the month of October, there are a ton of opportunities for families to enter into some kind of for their child. So there might be vigils, there are oftentimes walks, there are butterfly releases that are done, there are kinds of things that are done. And October 15th has actually been adopted as World Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day. And there's something on October 5th that we call the International Wave of Light. And in every time zone all around the world at 7:15 or at 7 p.m. on October 15th, candles in remembrance of their children. And so all around the world, there's this wave of light, we call it. And now I'm going to tear up. There's this wave of light, that remembering all these babies. And I know for me, I always light 3. I light one for Callan, one for Andrew, and one for all of the other babies. So you can enter into that place of corporate grieving and of finding these ways to really in that grief out. So October is a really great month to look for something to support your clients. And if you, as a professional, can kind of look around, you might contact the clients that you've worked with who've had losses, and this would be a great time for you to say, I was thinking of you and your baby, and use the baby to the baby. And I wanted to invite you to come with me because I would like to celebrate your baby with you on this day if you're comfortable doing it. That would fill up a bereaved parent. Know that somebody was thinking of them, somebody is intentionally entering into their grief with them and coming together with other bereaved parents to celebrate. And not just linger in grief, but to celebrate how beautiful these children's lives are, how they continue to impact us.
How wonderful. Ah, that's so beautiful. Thank you so, so much. You have just bounds of wisdom and so much to offer families and certainly professionals. I have learned so much in the last hour, and I definitely feel more confident to support families that are going through this. And this is going to be such a huge gift for people to watch. So thank you so, so much.
You're very welcome.
All right, I'm going to